Dear students, this is part 3 of kinship, caste and class. We have done till part 2. Now let's recapitulate what we had done in part 2. We had done social differences within and framework of caste, the right occupation, non-Kshatriya kings, jatis and social mobility, and beyond 4 varnas integration. Now part 3, we are going to focus on beyond 4 varnas, subordination and conflict, gendered access to property, as what were the rules of property laid down in Manusmriti, varna and access to property, an alternative social scenario, sharing wealth, explaining social differences, social contract, how where Buddhist and Brahmanical theories were different, we are going to discuss in this topic. Now let's go for the first topic, beyond 4 varnas, subordination and conflict. While Brahmins considered some people as being outside the system, they also developed sharper social divide by classifying certain social categories as untouchable. Those who considered themselves pure Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas avoided taking food and water from those they designated as untouchable. Some of the activities of untouchables were regarded as polluting. These included handling dead bodies and animals. Those who performed such tasks, designated as Chandals, were placed at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Now, who were the Chandals? They were category. In your previous topic we have done about the 4 varna system, that is the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. The first 3 were Dvija or the twice born, whereas the Shudras were the lowest in the category. Few to whom the Brahmins could not include within the framework of caste system, they were outcast, the Nishats, about whom we have studied, Eklavya, and the story of Guru Dronacharya as mentioned in Adi Parvan of Mahabharata. Another category, that is the untouchables, who were the Chandals. Mainly they were the lifters of the dead bodies. They executed the dead bodies of those who did not have relatives. The Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas did not want to see their faces. They were untouchables, and Manusmriti lays down the rules of the untouchables. That is the Chandals. Who were Chandals? What were the rules laid down in Manusmriti? Let's see. They had to live outside the village. They had to use discarded utensils. They had to wear clothes of the dead, had to wear only ornaments made of iron, and could not walk about in the villages and cities at night. If a upper caste by mistake saw the face of the Chandals, he immediately took bath in the river and asked forgiveness from God, that, "Oh God, please forgive me. Today I had a look of Chandal." So the Chandals were not allowed to enter inside the village. The upper class people did not see their faces. They merely executed the bodies of those who did not have relatives. Fa Yan and Huensang, the 2 Chinese pilgrims who visited India, they have mentioned in their account about the Chandals. They have mentioned about the social, economic and political structure of India in that period, mainly in the Gupta period. They visited India and they have mentioned in their account about the Chandals. Fayan or Fazian, same. He wrote that untouchables had to sound a clapper in the streets so that people could avoid seeing them. That is, if they entered inside the village, they had to clap so that people could avoid seeing them. And Huensang or Xuanzang, he observed that executioners and scavengers were forced to live outside the city. So they have mentioned the social condition of the society in their account, the two Chinese pilgrims who came to India. Buddhist theory repudiates it. Buddha, next chapter 4 is on Buddhism and Jainism, and Buddha repudiated the caste system. It is in this a Bodhisattva, which is the previous birth of Buddha, born again and again as a compassionate human being to help the mankind. And Bodhisattva as Chandal, Buddha was a crusader of untouchability. And in Matanga Jataka, he has written this story, Bodhisattva as a Chandal. It is a Pali text, Matanga Jataka, where Buddha in his previous birth is identified as a Chandal. Basically, this Jatak story is against untouchability. Buddha, as I told you all, explained that was a crusader of untouchability. And it is about a Matanga who was a Bodhisattva. He was born outside the city as a Chandal. And one day he visits in the city, Kashi that is, and he comes face to face, encounters Ditta Mangalika, who is a daughter of a merchant. And when Ditta Mangalika sees this Chandal, as per custom, she was going to the park along with her friends, and she feels that she has seen unauspicious, and she washed her eyes and she insults the Chandal, and her friends beat that Chandal. That why you came in our way, we saw you, now you are inauspicious. Now, Chandal Matanga, when she returned home, Chandal goes to her house, he sits in front and he tells that your daughter has insulted me a lot to the merchant. I want to get married to her. Until and unless you get me married, I won't move out of your place. I'm sitting outside the house. I won't leave. He was injured. The merchant was scared that he might die. And in those days, if a Chandal dies outside the house of a rich merchant, upper caste, that would be inauspicious. So he feels that it's better to get my daughter married to that Chandal than letting this Chandal sitting in front of my house, without food and water and dying. So he agrees to get that Chandal married to her daughter. And Ditta Mangalika marries. The Chandal brings her Matanga and he tells that you will get prestige, don't worry. He goes for the meditation, he meditates and he attains supernatural powers. And he tells Ditta Mangalika that you invite all the Brahmins in your house. I will display my supernatural power. And it is said that he appears breaking the disk of moon. He gets the divine power. And all Brahmins were amazed and they accept that he is a learned man. And Ditta Mangalika gets prestige now in the society, though she had married a Chandal, because Chandal could attain the supernatural powers. He becomes divine now. So now Chandal, she conceives and she gives birth to a baby boy. But Chandal leaves her and again Matanga goes back for the meditation. Her son grows up, Mandavya Kumara, and he becomes learned in the Vedas. And one day, again in Kashi, he began to provide food only to the Brahmins. Matanga comes to know, and now he feels that it's the right time to correct his son, as he also is considering himself to be upper caste and is giving food only to the Brahmins, not to the lower caste. That way, untouchability will never be removed. And he dresses himself in rags and takes clay arms in a bowl to his hand and arrives at his son's doorstep. And he asks for food. The son again insults him that he looks like an outcast and he was not worthy of alms. And here again he displays his supernatural power, but Ditta Mangalika comes to know that he is none other than her husband. So she goes and asks for forgiveness and takes a bowl of leftover food and tells that you lift this food, you take this food, and after that only it will be distributed among the Brahmins. So this is basically the Buddhist theory did not accept for this untouchability like Brahmanical supremacy. Buddhist theory contradicts it, repudiates it. Everybody could be the member of Buddhist Sangha irrespective of their caste and creed. Next chapter is on this only we are going to study. Now, what was gendered access to property? Inferior position of women, at that time it was in the society. Draupadi being staked in the game of dice, that indicates the inferior position of women. In Mahabharata, she was staked in the game of dice. And even when Gandhari advises Duryodhan not to fight with his own kins, and Duryodhan doesn't listen to the advice of his mother, it indicates that women had inferior position in society. Patrilineal succession was there. We have learnt in early parts. Now, according to Manu Smriti, Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastra, paternal state was to be divided equally among sons after the death of the father, with a special share to the elder. Women had no access to their father's property. Only the gift they received from their parents at the time of marriage, her jewelry, clothes, utensils, whatever the father gave at the time of the marriage, her Stridhan, that was called the Stridhan, she had share on that, and it could be inherited by her children, but without husband having any claim on it. At the same time, Manusmriti warned women against hoarding family property or even their own valuables without husband's permission. It indicates the supremacy of men in the society. Women had inferior position in the society. However, there was a contrary to it. The Brahmanical rules laid down in Dharma Shastra and Dharma Sutras were not universally followed. Chapter 2, we have read example of Prabhavati Gupta. Let's recapitulate. She was the daughter of Chandragupta II, and she was married to Vakataka ruler Rudrasen II. She inherited her husband's kingdom, and she ruled the kingdom on the behalf of her minor son, and she also inherited her father's property. As in chapter 2, we have seen, that is from the inscription, that how she donated the lands to the Brahmins. So she had an access to her father's property. Didda, there is an example of Didda, again a queen in Kashmir who inherited her father's property. There is also an evidence of a woman in Shravasti. She was a daughter of a wealthy potter and she owned 100 of her potter wheels from her father. Rajashri was the sister of Harshvardhan. She also had an effective position in the administration and she also inherited the property. So women inherited the property, but it was less in number. Mostly it was the patriarchal, the patrilineal society, and women had inferior position in the society and they did not inherit their father's property. It is of Sridhan in form of mostly jewellery and other gifts what the parents give to their daughter at the time of marriage. Now this is a source from your textbook where Manusmriti declares 7 means of acquiring wealth for men: inheritance, finding, purchase, conquest, investment, work and acceptance of gifts from good people, and women 6 means which was given in front of fire, that is marriage time, bridal procession or as a token of affection which she got from her brother, mother or father. She could also acquire wealth through any subsequent gift and whatever her affectionate husband might give her. That is, whatever the gift she got, that was her wealth, but rest she had no say in her. She did not have any claim in her father's property. But exceptions were there, as I mentioned, of Prabhavati Gupta in the society. Now, according to Brahmanical texts, regulating access to wealth was Varna, while a variety of occupations were listed for men. Of the first 3 Varna, the only occupation prescribed for Shudras was servitude. That is, Shudra served the first 3 Varnas. If these provisions were actually implemented, the wealthiest men would have been Brahmins, Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, and the poorest had been the Shudras. But according to Brahmanical norms, since Brahmins and Kshatriyas were the wealthiest, and then the Vaishyas who were the traders, the merchants, but the lowest were the Shudras. But Buddhist text again contradicts it. It tells that whoever was wealthy had a respect in the society, was powerful in the society. Even Shudras who were wealthy, they had respect in the society and they could employ Brahmins and Kshatriyas as their servants. So Buddhist theory doesn't agree that only according to their birth they had wealth, but anyone could be wealthy, even a Shudra could be wealthy and he had respect in the society. Now there is alternative social scenario, sharing wealth. That is, the generous people were respected in the society, whoever they were. In ancient Tamil Nadu, the men who were generous were respected, while those who were misery, that is didn't spend, were disrespected. And there were several chiefdoms 2000 years ago, and the chiefs were patrons of bards and poets who sang songs in praise of them. And poems included in the Tamil Sangam anthologies often illuminate social and economic relationships. While there were differences between rich and poor, those who controlled resources were also expected to share them. So in Sangam literature, anthologies are there. In that it is there that generous persons were respected in the society, whoever they were, whether they were a Brahmin, a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Shudra, and those who had property were expected to share in the society and they were respected. Now, social differences in the society. In the Brahmanical theory, the sacrifice of a primeval man, Purusha Sukta, we have learned that 4 Varnas were born. The Brahmins from the head, they were supreme mouth, they were supreme. Then the Kshatriyas from the hand, they were the warriors, the ruling class. The Vaishyas from the thighs, they were the traders, the merchants, and lowest from the feet were the Shudras. Buddhist theory contradicts it. While Brahmanical theory tells that power, right to rule was by birth, divinely ordained. But here again Buddhist theory contradicts. It is the theory of social contract. According to Buddhist theory, as mentioned in Sutta Pitaka, one of the Tipitakas of Buddha, it is there that human beings fully evolved bodily forms, nor was the world of plants fully developed. All human beings in initial state lived in an idyllic state of peace, taking from nature only what they needed for each meal. That is, initially human beings all lived together in peacefully and they were dependent on nature for their meal. However, as with the passage of time, as the society developed, there was a deterioration state as human beings became greedy, vindictive and deceitful. So as the society developed, you could see the various vices in the human beings. And then they decided to create an institution of kingship to control the society. And it was on human choice, that is the social contract, a contract between the human people and the king. Kingship, the institution was kingship was created and people paid the tribute in form of taxes for the services rendered by the king. As well as the king remained in power till he was able to maintain law and order, able to run his administration properly. If the king was not able to rule properly, it was the human beings again who removed him. So, institution of kingship was in fact totally based on the human choice. It was not divinely ordained, that is as in the Brahmanical theory, where divine origin was there after the sacrifice of the primeval man. The Brahmins laid down the duties of each and every varna. In Buddhist theory, kingship was man-made. It was an institution created by the human beings. It was a social contract, and the king remained in power till he enjoyed the confidence of the people, till he was able to rule properly. And if the king was unable to rule properly, the people had right to remove the king and change him. So this is the Buddhist theory of social contract. As I'm here, the social contract where human beings have made an agreement with their government, whereby the government and the people have distinct roles and responsibility. This theory is based on idea that human beings abandon a natural, free and ungoverned condition in favor of a society that provides them with order, structure and importantly protection. So this is the theory of social contract, where the institution of kingship and human beings, again I'm telling, it is on the social contract between the people. It is not divine creation, or it is not the privilege by the birth. Thank you. Next, the concluding part, we'll do it in part 4.